Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I'm Sally Stieglitz. I'm a member of AJL and of ALA. At AJL, I'm the editor-in-chief of our robust publication, AJL News and Reviews. It's a quarterly publication that has news of Jewish librarianship, Jewish books, and a great many reviews of Jewish books that are used for people for collection development, collection management. And in ALA, besides being a member, and in ACRL, I am a member at large on the UDLOS Advisory Committee. And I'm very, very happy, as always, to be joined by Sean Boyle, who's AJL Vice President and President-elect, and usually very good at Zoom management. Right, Sean? So on behalf of Sean and myself, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today or for watching this Zoom recording. Before we introduce our guest, Cindy Hohl, candidate for ALA president, let me tell you a little bit about AJL. In 1946, the Jewish Librarians Association was founded and composed of academic, archival, and research institutions. The Jewish Library Association, founded in 1962, emphasized work in synagogue, school, and community center libraries. These two associations merged in 1966 as the Association of Jewish Libraries. And in 2010, AJL became an affiliate of the American Library Association and is currently one of its 7 ethnic affiliates. Today, AJL is the leading authority on Judaic librarianship and a vibrant volunteer-run nonprofit professional organization that fosters access to information and research in all forms of media related to all things Jewish. The association promotes Jewish literacy and scholarship and provides a community for peer support and professional development. Our president, Michelle Margolis, was not able to join us this evening, but I'll invite Sean if he'd like to say a few words on her behalf.
We appreciate this opportunity to have strengthening with as an ALA affiliate. We understand even though we are an international association, with membership around the world, Canada, Israel, we do feel the ALA connection vitalness, the importance of the #1 library association in size and breadth. So we are very privileged to have you speaking with us today, and we're looking forward. We had a great time in New Orleans. Many of our members, our book award was able to get announced during the YMAs, and we're looking to keep continuing that, strengthening that relationship with ALA. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Now I'm very pleased to introduce you to Cindy Hohl, Director of Policy Analysis and Operational Support at Kansas City Public Library in Missouri, and a candidate for the ALA presidency. Cindy is past president of the American Indian Library Association and is an active member of other ALA affiliates, including the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association, the Black Caucus of ALA, Chinese Americans Librarians Association, and Reforma, the National Association to promote library and information services to the Latinos and the Spanish-speaking. As a member of the Public Library Association, a division of ALA, she currently co-chairs the Membership Advisory Group and was a member of the PLA Strategic Plan Review Team. Cindy is also a member of several roundtables: Intellectual Freedom Roundtable, sometimes called IFRT, Library Research Roundtable, or LRRT, and the Social Responsibilities Roundtable, sometimes called CERT, I believe, and that's SRRT. We love our acronyms in library world. Welcome, Cindy. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to kick things off with a question that I think will not surprise you. Why did you decide to run for ALA president?
Sure, thank you. First of all, I would like to introduce myself in Dakota. I'm Itakiapi, that means greetings relatives. Damakota Isan Teoete. I am Dakota of the Santee Sioux Nation. Ikchita Koja, Lyle and Philomene Henry. I am the granddaughter of Lyle and Philomene. Ina Janice Te Robert. I'm the daughter of Janice and Robert. On Petuwash Day, good evening. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. In our Indigenous ways, we always introduce ourselves, the land we come from, our people, and of course, our direct parents and grandparents. So it's important that we gather together in a good way. And so that's why I introduced you guys as relatives. In Dakota, our primary belief is that we are all related. And so we always say Mitak Wiawasi, and that means that we're here gathering in a good way. No matter what the content is and the discussion that will be had, it's always so that everyone moves forward together. That doesn't mean that we don't disagree on occasion. And so we always start our meetings in the same way, just so that we have that reminder. So I do appreciate the questions and the opportunity for me to run for ALA president. It was actually twofold. But as an ALA Spectrum Scholar, I'm committed to actively increasing diversity within the field, and I seek out opportunities to use my platform to bring matters of inclusion to the forefront of this profession. It's very important to me that I contribute to the success of diversifying the field while offering support to retain Black, Indigenous, people of color staff members, and I seek to expand my professional network through volunteer work across the field, where I also contribute to working on many areas supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and social justice in libraries. This was the second nomination that I have received to run for ALA president, and so I felt that I was being called to this position. With a high capacity for learning and service, I am well prepared to represent the membership, and I look forward to meeting even more of our colleagues to hear about their journeys in ALA as well. As a member of an ethnic affiliate, I too share many desires to be seen within ALA. And when they envision the One ALA slogan, I hope it's something that really comes to fruition, and that when it's implemented, it includes all of us. I think that would be very helpful in strengthening that.
Thank you. I just want to mention that in our tradition, our names also have our parents' names as part of our names. If you're Reformed Jew, you include both your father and mother's names, but if you're not, our traditional names, not our English names, are the names so-and-so, daughter or son of your father's name. So I thought that was very interesting that you use that to introduce yourself. I like that shared value that we have, that shared experience.
Yes, definitely. It's important to recognize.
I'm going to get back to that later, but I think it's interesting because we both come from non-Western cultures.
Right.
What is your vision for ALA?
Well, for me, it's really to represent as a diverse leader, someone who helps strengthen the association by building community and making sure that we're welcoming everyone in and creating a space where everyone knows that they belong there. When we consider how to implement the One ALA concept, the practice needs to be realized through our practice throughout the field, reflecting the value of diverse viewpoints and backgrounds to recruit and retain professionals. We need to see leaders contributing to the work from all backgrounds and experiences as well. It would be amazing to see our members highlighted and their work celebrated so that we can all get involved and support the work that needs to move forward together. I believe that we need more members and volunteers. And so in building those relationships, it's something that I believe ALA has an opportunity to not only increase engagement, but to actively recruit new members. And a good way to do that is through a referral program. If we believe in the work and the strength of ALA, we should be able to also recruit our colleagues to join us. But the barrier remains, from what I've heard, is that it's not affordable for everyone. So we maybe need to consider how we can, eliminate that barrier. So how do we do that? There's many different ways we can look at that. But that's my vision. It's one place where everyone feels that they belong and that we see that diverse representation throughout.
We do have one follow-up question in the chat from Emily. She asks, what does the One ALA mean? This is the first time she's heard of it.
Oh, okay, great. So One ALA is the slogan that has come out of the operating agreement, which is still being developed and will be considered. So in these discussions, we're talking about how ALA is that umbrella but that it's bringing in all of the divisions, chapters, and roundtables so that we feel like we truly are part of ALA, no matter where we find our home. And so with that, the main change has been the financial aspect, in that it will be revenue based in regard to spending and allocations. And so looking at those projections, the one ALA umbrella concept is going to be where everyone's going to request the support that they need to move their work forward. And that hopefully all missions are in alignment, and that everyone feels like, they're truly connected. So like with one of the divisions that I'm active in is the Public Library Association, because I work in a public library. I often feel like it's a totally different culture when I attend PLA programs. It doesn't feel the same as ALA, if that makes sense. So I think that, as they move to that one ALA concept, it's really important that they have representatives who are buying into it to support it throughout the association. Does that answer your question, Emily?
She's did this. I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. It's just not something I'd heard of before, and I didn't know. So are we moving away from the divisions and sections?
No, if all of that
Operating agreement is changing.
Yeah, all of that remains. Divisions, chapters, roundtables, those affiliates, those are not moving anywhere. It's more in alignment and helping everyone, feel a part of one big association. So that's really been that initiative.
I just want to take a moment to welcome Michelle, who had a slight delay getting here. Michelle Margolis is our president. Michelle, you have your hand raised. Sean, can you unmute her so she can speak?
I can unmute. I came in through the, my question is really, it's interesting because HAL is an association that includes research libraries, school libraries, academic libraries, and public libraries, and in a way, sort of a microcosm of this idea. So it's really interesting, and most of the time it's wonderful. It's also sometimes challenging. And I wonder, I'm so intrigued to hear how ALA, which is, multiple tens of times larger than we are, is thinking about navigating this really interesting concept.
Sure. So, and Michelle, I don't know if you heard, I'm also active in an ethnic affiliate in the American Indian Library Association.
Yeah.
So we have similar experiences, I believe, in regard to being under that ALA umbrella. So, when they did the organizational effectiveness work back in the days of SCOE, that was really the blueprint that started this work moving forward to this current iteration. So when they're looking at, moving forward together, it's really looking at the finances, making sure the resources are in place, and seeing how we can continue to grow the membership. They're looking at diversifying the revenue streams and looking at how, publishing especially can be more of a producer and less of, an expense. They have had some minor growth in that area recently. So that's nice to see that bounce back a bit. But, when I hear one ALA, I believe it's going to be something that's really interesting to follow during that implementation, because as we all have different needs from our affiliates, to me, that honestly, that's where I feel like it's my home. ALA is my home. Whereas being a part of ALA, I've sought out opportunities to belong, to grow a network, to feel like I had a place. And honestly, I can't say that Native Americans have a voice within ALA. I don't see it in council. I don't see it in, in any governance documentation. I don't see us trying to include those Indigenous perspectives in ways. So it's something where that's an area of opportunity, I believe.
I think that's very similar to how many of us feel about AJL. But I see that Hyam has his hand raised. If you're able to unmute, please speak up. But if you're not, you can always put it in the chat.
Hi, Cynthia. Thank you for coming and for us to listen. My question really in terms of inclusion. So let's say in terms of programming, and I don't think too much with ALA, but just keeping aware of, let's say, Saturday and holiday programming where it might be difficult. You know, how is to be more inclusive where, let's say, many who observe the Sabbath and who observe the Jewish holidays where there's no conflict, or how would that be, or how would you handle that, or in terms of programming and reason?
Yes, thank you, Hyam. That's a great question. I actually served on the program committee for LibLearnX in New Orleans, and it was interesting to go through that process and see how programs were selected. So how the proposals come through the clearinghouse is that information's redacted. You don't know who the submitter is or necessarily their library. It all depends on what they draft into the description, but they make it a point to be as neutral as possible so that, you know, you aren't picking certain areas for, you know, certain reasons or what have you. But when we were looking at the schedule, that was what was challenging to me, because it seemed like we had an abundance of proposals, some of them very strong. And it was hard to get down to, well, you know, which one do you go with? Because you had a finite number of slots. So we hear from the membership that they don't want the conference to be too long, but at the same time, you don't want to be in session from dusk till dawn. So when we're looking at how we can have the most impactful experience, we need to consider what that schedule looks like. Does it have to be over a weekend? A lot of people have provided that feedback. You know, it's challenging for any professional, but when you're juggling your professional and your personal responsibilities, that conference situation is something that I believe should be evaluated. You know, perhaps they have that feedback and that's something that we could look at. But when you look at what we need as professionals, I mean, personally, I don't need to be gone over the weekend. I have 3 little girls, you know, and so it's challenging for me because then I miss that time with them. But I know I'm one of 58,000. But, you know, when to your point, when you look at how many people attend the conference, it's fairly small. So I would think that we could be adaptive and we could provide no conflict times to be as inclusive as possible. But, you know, you start getting into ADA and stuff as well. I know that they do the minimum when it comes to that because that's what you need to do. But there's areas of opportunity there as well. You know, when the sessions are back to back, if you have mobility issues, you can't get to the next session on time, especially when you're at these large convention centers. It's a challenge. It's something that needs to be looked at. So I do recognize that concern, and I agree with you on that.
Thank you very much.
I don't
Thank you.
know if you were at the Martin Luther King Sunrise Breakfast. I was there. I noticed that there were stairs on both sides of that platform. Rather, it was inaccessible. And because I'm on both sides, I did bring that to the attention of a few people. But, you know, disability seems to be overlooked a lot.
Yes, I agree with you. And I did notice the stage. I noticed the stage at another session that I was asked to speak at as well. So, you know, that's definitely something that we need to take into consideration. And, you know, maybe in their surveys, they can actually have a question specifically about what were the barriers that kept you from attending a session, or overall for the members who choose not to attend a conference, you know, what are the things that you need?
I would love to see accessibility as the default. You know,
I agree.
Yeah. So let's just see. Michelle added, ultimately, there's no one perfect time that works for everyone. That's true. I mean, you're really being asked to do an impossible task, which is to make everyone happy. But we all have our concerns and our reasons about what certain days don't work for us, or we feel disrespected if things are done on certain days. Like if people have hesitations about serving or inability to serve on certain awards committees for the YMAs, if the deliberations and meetings are taking place on a Saturday. And I've heard conversations with an AJL about that people are not really that happy, that they feel excluded, that they can't have their voice. Let me move on to my next question, which I think you've kind of touched on, but maybe if you feel you have anything more to say. And also because, again, I think AJL is a lot like AILA. Where do you see an association like AJL, or let's say ALIA, and their members within the broader landscape of ALA?
Sure. Well, I love that question because I've thought of it often. In my time as president of ALA, we had opportunities to collaborate with ALA. I experienced how ALA can uplift and support the affiliate so that they can scale up their work, but that to also offer that mutual support to the affiliates. We were supported on the bill to change the definition of a tribal library to a public library so that LSTA funding could be accessible to every tribal community. So then they would no longer be excluded by the state library definition. Before that, it was completely up to the state library to decide which library they would fund within their state. And I continued to raise our voice on that to let everyone know that. So we actually worked with the governance office to help facilitate that change. And we worked with a senator in New Mexico to help support that language. And, so when you look at an ethnic affiliate, we often have smaller memberships. ALA, we have just a little over 300 members. So our voice isn't that strong, or impact needs to be great, but often we feel that we just really don't have that support outside of our network. So, the other thing that ALA brought me in on was to moderate some discussions on E-rate and broadband access in tribal library communities. And that's something that was impactful and helped some librarians receive access to information and training as well to help them move forward with the grant writing process, to meet with some of the vendors that provide that service. And, of course, after we can secure the funding, that's really what's going to facilitate that change. So I think that what an area of opportunity for ALA to support their affiliates is to make sure that they're representing us in their communication channels as well. They have blogs, they have the American Libraries magazine, and it's something that it's important to highlight our work and those collaborations. I consider that probably the highlight of my career, actually, helping change the definition of a tribal library to a public library. That means that barrier has been removed. And that wasn't really acknowledged. It's like, okay, well, we helped you, it was done, it's great. And to me, it's like that was a missed opportunity. ALA really could have talked a little bit more about that.
Sounds like a big win. I'm surprised they didn't.
Yeah. But there's a lot of big wins, but all I ever hear on the press release is ALA's big win. And so again, if we're one ALA, we need to remember that the work here is as significant and it matters as much as at the national level.
So our experiences in the past few years have been getting included. Just to take up the thread of this conversation. For instance, for that, I was going to go to Odlos to represent Odlos and at the sunrise breakfast. And we were just excited that somebody from AJL was going to be in the room. And then I noticed every other affiliate was included except for us. And so I contacted them and they said, oh, we didn't know how to reach you. And then they invited us this year. This is what we have to go through to be included over and over and over again. And I'm not asking you to defend them or speak for them. It's just, we are very, very frequently excluded, whether it's intentional or not. We're just not invited. And all we really want is like a little bit of a seat at the table to be part of the conversations. So it's been that way. It's just been that way with certain other things. For instance, every other ethnic affiliate has a guaranteed seat on Odlos. We don't have one. And this is the first time by me being a member at large that we have anybody at Avos. So anyway, we have a good question from Chaim, because I don't want to ask you to defend that at all. I just like to share that information.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that happened. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, thank you. Chaim would like you to describe what a tribal library is. I think we could all learn from
Sure.
that.
Well, I just popped an article link into chat from Dr. Sandy Littletree, who works at the University of Washington. And her dissertation is, let me tell you about tribal libraries. So if I find that link, I'll pop it in there as well. But so a tribal library is a community library within a tribal setting. So tribal libraries actually have multiple roles. It can be the community library, the public library. It may be the only resource for academic students if students are doing virtual learning, or if a college or university isn't nearby. It is the special library because it has special collections in it. Specifically, it will be, tribal artifacts could be in there, tribal literature, and it could also be the school library. So like our village is in Nebraska, and we don't have a public library. We have a school library that's not open to the public, of course. And we only have one school for kindergarten through 12th grade. And then we have a community college, which has basically no circulating collection. There's just, a few textbooks for the students in those programs. So for us, that is an area of opportunity. We would benefit from having a full library, but we're pretty small and we don't have that. So for some tribal communities, they have wealth and they have huge libraries and they're these wonderful hubs of their community. But for the majority of tribal libraries, they're fairly small in stature, 0 to no funding. And so the collections may be donations, may be out of date. It's the same with the concerns with the school system. Tribal schools are under the Bureau of Indian Education. And so being a federal program, the funding is inconsistent. So tribal libraries are very robust in some areas and in others rather primitive, and basic needs aren't being met. So that's why it was so important that they should be able to have access to E-rate funding so that they can bring in internet service if they don't have it. But that being said, a lot of tribal communities are in very rural areas. And so that service might not be available anyway. So it's pretty challenging in tribal communities to really receive the support that you need. Because the other thing is we're based in the oral storytelling tradition. And so, a lot of our stories and our gifts are within our clans and our families and passed down through generations. And so that value system is a little bit different. We don't rely upon a library because that's not really ingrained in the culture. Is that helpful?
It
Yes.
is. That's very fascinating. Thank you very, very much.
Are the
Yes, thank you.
Are the tribal libraries not eligible for the state funding?
Well, they are. It depends on how much funding is available. Again, if the funding is through the state library, the state librarian allocates which community gets what. And if you're a real small community, the funds might be gone by the time they get to you. We've had this fractured system between the tribal library and the state library. State and local governments don't always recognize the responsibility to the tribal community. It's almost like they're not a resident of the state, and we absolutely are. Just because we're members of sovereign nations doesn't make us any less, citizens of the United States of America either. That wasn't the case when my grandparents were born, though. They were born in our village in Nebraska in 1919, and they wouldn't be considered American citizens until they were 5 years old when the law changed in 1924. And so these aren't things that happened so long ago that it's just ancient history. These are things that are very real. And so tribal communities are isolated. You know, we were moved there. We are original inhabitants of this land, but that doesn't mean that that was the area that our people were used to navigating, to farming, to gathering on. So when you look at the tribal areas, oftentimes they are not around a lot of commerce or, you know, big cities. So when you're isolated, that just makes your need for information even greater. And health information and health literacy is something that is so vital to the support of Indian country. And Indian country is the formal term of tribal lands across North America. So I hope that that's helpful.
That was helpful, and I hope that within ALA that initiatives are taken up to remediate this, because it sounds like it's very important and yet not at the forefront of advocacy as it should be.
Right. Yeah, definitely. We could use all the help we can get.
Well, AJL is always a good partner. So
That's wonderful.
another question I have, and again, if we've already covered this, feel free to say I've already answered this. What do you bring to ALA that is unique and will help it move forward?
Well, I have a lifetime of indigeneity to recall upon. And so being a member of a sovereign nation, I was born into a community that absolutely understands our relationship nation to nation. And so we are well versed in the governmental system at the federal level. And of course, we also are cognizant of our own constitution and our own bylaws and our own mission and way of being. And so I have those perspectives when I work in the mainstream. We call it walking between both worlds, when you have your indigenous knowledge that you carry with you, but you choose to work in the mainstream. For me, I was the only person who ever left our community to go to school. And that was a really big thing for me. I wasn't sure that I could actually do that. And my mom was very upset. I had cousins calling me all the time, reminding me of what my responsibility was and that I should be home with my mom. But at the same time, my mom did encourage my learning. I'm a lifelong learner. If school is free, I would go all the time. I just absolutely love learning. And so for me, I had to challenge myself to move to an area and to explore higher education and to see what that world was about. And so I absolutely loved the university that I moved to. It was in Topeka, Kansas. I didn't know anyone there, but I'm a connector. And so, of course, I went to the student union and found where the student groups were, and the Indigenous Students Association was inactive. But I saw Indigenous students walking around campus. So I was curious about that. And I asked how we could have our chapter started again. And they said, well, we need a president. So of course, the rest is history. I said, well, I will volunteer just to, so we have community. And, there was like 20 students who saw my flyers and started coming to our meetings. And of course I bribed them with pizza, and it was just wonderful to be able to see other people from tribal backgrounds that were also there on their own. And so I'm big on building community. I believe that you can find your people no matter where you go. But within ALA, it shouldn't be this vast network where people don't find that connection. That's what we're here for. We like I say, Mitakuiwasi, we're all related. We belong to each other. And so it's important that we use those Indigenous perspectives. Leaders can't make decisions without thinking about the impact of those decisions. And for us, we talk about 7 generations. We make decisions that honor our ancestors and our elders, especially, that support and recognize our colleagues and those of our generation. And then most importantly, that we're creating the world we want our youth to inherit. And so some people may think that those are ways that are long gone, but they aren't in our communities. It's something that's ingrained in everything that we do. So I use that perspective. And my first library, I would always talk about how we need to support our staff and support our community. And it almost became like this joke. And they said, you always talk about support. Can you tell me more about that? Well, honestly, I didn't think I needed to define support. So I felt that that was kind of unique. So, in my way, I don't make decisions alone. I believe that we're stronger together, and that means that everyone should have a voice and share that, and that we're actually listening and not just pretending, sending out a survey and never revisiting the findings or sharing them. I think libraries are guilty of that at sometimes too. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that is. But just to circle back a second, what made you decide to be a librarian?
My husband's librarian, and he recruited me.
Okay.
And
He
so
groomed you.
he did, yes. He brought me to the wonderful world. Well, so his mom was a school librarian. And so
Okay.
he grew up volunteering, and he always knew what he was going to do. He, when I met him, he was going to go to library school. And I was in my first career, I was in marketing and communications, and I have an MBA, and, I was in the for-profit sector, and I really didn't feel like I had anything more to learn there. I felt like I was at the top, and
Yeah.
it was kind of boring. So
Wow.
I welcomed the change.
Okay. Well, for many of us, it's a second career. I know it's a second career for me. Chaim is a second career for you, I think. I'm not sure. Raise
No,
your
not
hand if
really.
it
It's
is.
been like this since I was about 19.
Yeah. So I've noticed some of us are academic librarians. I used to be an academic librarian, but I've heard a lot of people say they feel like ALA is not for academic librarians. I never felt that way. They just, I don't know. Did you ever observe that you hear academic librarians say, oh, ALA is just for public librarians. Every time I hear somebody talking about another conference, they're like, that's for the other group, which is so surprising. Because I think there was so much for me to learn at ALA as an academic librarian.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's the first time I heard that. The majority of colleagues that I have met across the country are academic librarians. And so I always found that interesting because, like I said, to me, PLA has its own feel. And, the PLA tracks are basically, the same, what public libraries are dealing with, working on the front lines. And it's a smaller group for sure. We all tend to know each other fairly closely. But that's what I loved about ALA, was meeting archivists and people from special libraries. I met, a couple law librarians. I met special librarians from, different, like music and medical. And so for me, I guess I haven't paid attention to which track, if there is one, is targeting one group, one library or the other.
So Emily is also an academic librarian, and she commented that there was virtually no programming for academic librarians at last summer's conference, but LibLearnX was surprisingly rich. And Elliot's also an academic librarian, and he agrees. I think the thing that makes it that it's always worked for me is because I would be an academic librarian who would be very happy to go to a program on public librarianship or any other topic. That's what, I'll just go to anything I find interesting and I find a way that it's relevant to my work. But a lot of people are looking for very specific training programs. I'm not sure ALA can be everything to every person in a 2.5-day conference, but it's certainly trying.
Yeah, well, so I have the insider knowledge from being on the program team, and that when proposals are submitted through the clearinghouse, like I said, that information, it's not redacted, it's just not even shown. There's literally no way to identify who submitted it, what library they're from, and
Oh,
really
okay.
who it's for. So I could see how maybe that's an area of opportunity that should be considered more. But I'm also involved in the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. And they were more heavy in archives and museums when I attend their conference. They have a wonderful conference. So I reached out to them because that's what I do. And they asked me to start the Tribal Library Council with them. So I'm collaborating with another past president of ALA And we're moving through that process with them so that they can beef up their library programs at conferences as well. Because we definitely saw that there. I mean, they even have, like archival certificates, and they would go out on museum tours. And so for the librarian part, it kind of seemed a little bit not as strong. So I definitely saw that over there. But for ALA, I don't know. I wonder if there's a recent breakdown. I think the last survey I saw was quite some time back.
Mm.
I will look into that.
It's something, it hasn't been my experience, but I've definitely heard other people comment on it. So
Okay.
we were having a vigorous discussion the other day about genre fiction as we're planning future programs. I'm just wondering, what do you like to read? Or what do you read?
Oh, so it's funny. I love romance and thrillers. I like to be
genre.
really happy. I like to, I love stories with happy endings. I'm the same with movies. If the ending's not good, like the whole movie was not good. But then I also get scared and intrigued by, thrillers, and I enjoy mysteries as well. So I will also confess that I love cookbooks, but I rarely use any of the recipes.
No,
I'm-
I read cookbooks for cookbooks. I agree.
I don't know
just
why I do
read
that.
them because it's like the fantasy of imagining if you would make it. And then you look at the ingredients and I was like, I don't have this. And I don't feel like buying it for $6 to use a quarter ounce of it, It's
I
like,
know. Yes. Why are spices so expensive? But yeah, it's like, well, but we can make spaghetti in a few minutes.
very true. And you said you had 3 girls, so stick with the
Yes.
spaghetti, I would say. But yeah, I like to read mystery, and a lot of people looked at me like I had 2 heads. So it's like,
Oh, yeah. Well, Jennifer McMahon is one of my favorite authors. Honestly, when I read her books, I think, how does she think in those worlds? It's amazing. I love reading new authors as well. And so I always look at the book list recommendations to see who I can connect with.
I really enjoy the author events at ALA annual, and the speakers can be so interesting. You go, you've never heard of somebody, and by the time you leave, you're a fan.
Yes, absolutely. I was asked to moderate a panel with 2 authors in New Orleans, and they sent me the ebook beforehand. It's going to be published this summer, and it was so nice to see their passion and their drive for their work and why they wrote what they did. And it's a very personal story. My Powerful Hair by Carol Lindstrom and Steph Littlebird.
Right?
And so I love being a part of that because, that's, to me, that's the fun part of librarianship, connecting readers to the stories.
I will say Scholastic had 2 excellent programs at, you maybe didn't have time to go to them, but they really rolled out the red carpet for librarians at Live Learn X. 2 beautiful programs with authors speaking about their upcoming books. So I really enjoyed that. So as well, I don't know about you, but I walked about 7 miles a day at Live Learn X.
I usually get my steps in, but this time I was at my campaign booth, and
Oh.
it was kind of lonely just standing in one
I'm
spot.
sorry.
What was nice is people came up to you, but at the same time, I'm used to running all around.
Yeah, I guess you could have gone up and down with a mobile cart.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Can you imagine how much fun? If you just put that pizza on your cart, you would get lots of people to stop and say hello.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So I think we're just coming up to the end of the hour. I just wanted to ask Michelle if she had anything. Oh, I meant to talk about our non-Western cultures, but I feel like you covered that so thoroughly. Many things you said sounded very familiar without being the same.
Yeah,
from
that's
our-
really, I mean, as you were speaking both about Ayla and about your experience as a Native American, it's so interesting to hear sort of resonances. AJL exists because Judaica librarianship or being a librarian in a Judaic space or dealing with materials, Judaic materials is different and requires a different nuance and a different kind of training that we all have questions and we turn to each other because there's nobody else who really understands this work I'm on a working group dealing with issues of provenance, and we've actually looked with interest at the Society of American Archivists work on Native American artifacts, partially because Jewish materials aren't bounded by space. So if a country, we've had experiences where a country that persecuted Jews comes forward and says, well, this item is being sold at auction and we want it back because it's our cultural heritage. And the descendants of those refugees step forward and say, absolutely not. It's ours, we created it. And even though you tried to, do whatever you did, this is how do we think about provenance in those ways when you're not dealing with a state, and thinking about who represents the people and those kinds of questions is something that we're really grappling with as part of this working group. So it's really we're looking at guidance that's been going on in your area, really to think about educating people differently in how materials move around and sometimes are taken, and how to deal with them in a proper way.
Well, I would be happy to talk to you about that.
Maybe I will follow up with you. Yeah,
I did a webinar yesterday and one today on that very thing.
Oh, really?
Yesterday it was with the Association of Law Librarians, with OCLC, and today it was NISO. And so, in both of those webinars, that's exactly what we talked about, inclusive metadata.
Yes.
you need to talk to the people who represent those communities.
Right.
Like for me, I talk about identity. I talk about I'm a member of a sovereign nation. I'm a resident of a state. I'm a citizen in the United States. But if you ask me, Cindy, who are you? Damakota Midwankton.
Right.
I am Midwankton, Dakota.
Yeah.
But you won't find that anywhere. You'll hear people say we're Sioux. Well, that's what the colonizers called us, and that's our federally recognized name. So when you look at all of those identifiers in records, if you're going to search for materials that are representing an entire people, you need to know how they recognize themselves. And for researchers especially, it's so challenging. I did that in my undergrad. I was at the library and I was telling them, you have materials in your collection that you can't find in the catalog, because in Kansas there are 4 tribes there, and they had them under usually like the federal term, but they didn't even spell those right. And so I was like, hey, for what it's worth, here's how you spell like the Kickapoo.
Right. And this is
I
something
think that'd be so difficult, but
yeah, absolutely. I
yeah.
literally had this conversation yesterday with a colleague of mine around this question. You may be aware of it, about Anglo-Saxon, use of the term Anglo-Saxon, which is being moved, people are moving away from because of its white supremacist connections. And we were talking about finding material, because he asked me about whether we have early English material in our collection. And I said, well, what's a search that I work in Jewish studies? I don't know. What's a search term you would use? And he said, well, I guess Anglo-Saxon, because that's still the term that researchers know is what's in the catalog. And so these questions of, we've identified this as something that's inappropriate, and now how do we move to, like, so we change it, but then we want to also make it accessible to people who might not know about the change or know about these shifts. So many questions. I'd love to get your contact information. I know I don't want to hold us up.
I'll send it to you if that's
thank
okay.
you.
I'll make it easy. But before we finish, Chaim works at the Library of Congress on similar work in metadata, and he did really
Wonderful.
Yes. So the minute you mentioned and all these, I'm part of a working group here that does demographic group terms, and there's a whole project going on about Native American.
It's fading a little bit. Hi, and maybe turn off your
Like, he's
camera,
crazy.
and so your audio will be good.
Yeah. Oh, there he's back.
There you are.
Unstable connection.
Okay, good.
And I'm at work. So but no, but we're dealing with this quite a lot. Terms that are seen as pejorative, changing those terms. It's been doing it for a couple number of years. But with the Native American tribes is a huge project going on right now in terms of making talk about accessibility. This is one area that's being worked on. I don't know how far along they are, but the other group says, but it's something we are very much, the Royal We of the Library of Congress is very much aware of and trying to really work on that. I mean, we do that same thing with terms that reflect the Jewish people. We did this one about a year and a half ago on Marranos, for example, changing it. And
Marrano is a pejorative term for Jews who
Yeah,
converted secretly. They converted to Christianity under duress, but secretly continue to protect behaving as Jews.
That was
and-
during the Spanish Inquisition in Spain.
right.
Or in
And it
Portugal.
stuck around. I know that the history of it in terms of a subject heading, and it changed, but not to change that most people like anyways. But something the library is very much aware of, and it's not an easy thing just to change, but it has to be changed in a way that's meaningful and that makes sense too. And that takes a lot of time. Not defending the Library of Congress per se, but it's a huge task in itself though. But in terms of Native American tribes, it's been going on for quite some time here, or since I've been here anyways. They really are working on that. And so both in subject headings and in demographic group terms as well.
Well, thank you for that work. Impacting universal records is always the starting point, and everyone looks to the
Yeah.
Library of Congress. So Carla Davis Castro used to be on our executive board.
Mhm.
And so I believe she's on that working group, or she mentioned that she was.
I know her. She moved around a little bit, but she might still be on a working group. But I think it's CRS now. I think she's in Congressional Research
Okay.
Services. So I don't know if she's still there, but
Mhm.
but it's something. It's not easy. It's not the same news as, let's say, illegal aliens was about 6 years ago.
Right. Yeah, that's immediately, what everyone thinks
Everybody
about.
thinks
but
of, yeah.
Yeah,
And it took Congress to say
there's a
change
lot
it.
more.
There's so much work to do.
Yeah.
So Cindy, thank you so much for speaking with us. I know we're a small group, but we happen to be a small organization, and other people have an opportunity to watch this recording. I know you did an event earlier today, so we kind of felt like people might have gone to that one.
This is my 4th event today.
Oh,
So
goodness.
It's fine.
Well,
I'm all
It
over.
doesn't end.
Well,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Pitame
Thank you.
Wopita. I'm grateful, and thank you very much.
And we'll say
Thank you.
Toda Rabba. And Sean, can you stop the recording?